All right, y'all, this one is probably going to be a bit windy and maybe a little venti, and it's going to be a lot of things, but hopefully there's going to be some helpful nuggets for somebody in here. Been going through it the past couple of months. I think the last few videos that I recorded were shorts, and I was actually feeling pretty great. I had started seeing a naturopath and had started to address some gut dysbiosis as well as mycotoxin exposure. It had some functional testing done through that naturopath and found ochratoxin levels that were about 5 times the recommended limit. And then there was some gut dysbiosis, including Clostridia. And so we were addressing those and was feeling pretty good. In those previous videos, you're welcome to go check those out. It started to lose my cravings for like chocolate and, sweets in general. Had started to feel better energy, just a lot of positive movement in that direction. So it was very encouraging. I'll kind of give you a recap of what's been happening. As far as I can tell, I've been really hesitant to make a video just because it's been so chaotic. It's really been hard for me to kind of not only manage things, but also to understand what's happening. And I don't want to cause confusion and, kind of like misinterpret my symptoms and pass on misinformation. So just been kind of hesitant there. I think I have a little bit of clarity about some of the things that might be happening, but of course, none of this is meant to be taken as medical advice. Please always talk to a healthcare professional if you're considering making any changes to your routine. But I will share from my experience from the past few months so that you can hopefully do your own research and maybe it will be beneficial to you in some way. But basically had been feeling good. Around January, I started to notice in my health tracking app that my heart rate variability was kind of tanking, like just decrease, like a downward trend, and didn't really have an understanding as to why. In March earlier this year, I went for a routine eye appointment with my retinal specialist because I've had retinal issues in the past, and had to have an urgent laser treatment because I had a horseshoe tear, which was a little scary, quite scary actually, because I had had previous laser treatments that were extremely painful and kind of traumatizing. And thankfully, this retinal specialist had a much gentler approach, and so it was still scary and still very painful, but I got through it. But because of that, I still had in my mind, okay, I'm on all these supplements, I'm addressing the mold factor, I'm addressing the gut dysbiosis. So what, are there other factors that might be causing oxidative stress to, cause those eye issues? And so when I next met with my naturopath, in which we were retesting to see how things were changing over time, I asked her about some eye supplements, so then I started those. In April, I got to go on vacation with my husband, which was a lot of fun, and we went to Disney. And during that time, I noticed that my POTS symptoms were really flaring up. And it took me some time to realize that. It was in hindsight that I really recognized it. I was in a queue for one of the rides, and it was very, very hot out, and was starting to feel kind of anxious, racing thoughts, a little bit of dizziness, and just felt like I needed to lay flat, like be flat. And I hadn't experienced that in quite a while. I had actually had a lot of improvement in that area, and so it was kind of surprising to me. It caught me off guard that I was experiencing that, and I didn't really know what to make of that. And so anyways, got back from vacation, and that was when I had scheduled a next session with my naturopath, and we were retesting using the GI map and the OAT test. And those results came back and we found a lot of improvements with my gut health, but there was also the Clostridia was sticking around, and I also had an increase in H. pylori, and my good gut bacteria were in such a good place. I was really concerned about having to do like triple antibiotic treatment for H. pylori and that whole bit. I really wanted to stay away from that if I could, and thankfully my naturopath said that like my good gut bacteria were in such a good place and the numbers were so low for the H. pylori that we could try a more natural approach first. So that's what we're doing. But something else that she had pointed out with the oat test was that my dopamine levels were increasing, but they weren't being broken down properly. And by this time I had started to have like more tics again and migraines. And I was also really concerned because I'd had the kind of POTS-like episodes when we were on vacation, but then on the day-to-day basis, I was noticing that my blood pressure was decreasing. So it would be like in the 90s over 60s, which isn't like terribly low, but I could certainly feel it. I was having a hard time concentrating at work. I was getting very pale. And on top of that, I was starting to feel like to me, what I was interpreting as kidney pain, like mid-back pain. And it was just making things really difficult to manage. And so I was asking her, like what could be playing into that. She said that the gut bacteria issue could be, causing those, but in my understanding, there could be other factors as well. And so I kind of started to dig into that a little bit, started to look into heavy metals, realized that, having gone gluten-free for around 11 years and then being vegetarian, vegan, and mostly dairy-free for a number of years, I had been exposed to a lot of foods that could be very high in heavy metals, especially if you're consuming them on a chronic basis. And I also looked into a gene variant that was of interest that can kind of cause that dopamine increase but prevent the breakdown of it, which is the Dopamine Beta-Hydroxylase, which is a mouthful, but it's DBH gene variant, which my naturopath had actually pointed out from a consumer-based genetic report. She didn't diagnose anything, of course, that's not in her scope, but it did pique my interest because when I started to look into the medical literature, in this medical literature actually was for much more extreme cases, people who had gene variants where that DBH function is much more affected than in, the variant that I have perhaps. But the ptosis, the eyelid drooping, the orthostatic hypotension, even joint laxity was presenting in the literature as possible things, as well as kidney dysfunction. And I, had all of that in mind, and I actually started having more and more what I believe to be kidney pain as well as urinary symptoms, and went to an urgent care. They ran lab work and they ran a urinalysis, and they were like, hey, your kidneys are functioning great, which was a relief, of course, but for those of us in the chronic illness space, it's like, okay, well, what is going on? And so amid all of this, I had been looking into the heavy metals. When we were on vacation, I had crunched on crushed ice. I really like crushed ice. I don't think it's an iron deficiency thing, though I think that I was becoming iron deficient around that time, just based on some of the symptoms I was having. But I just like the texture of crushed ice, and it's just a bad habit that I indulged in over vacation. And I do have mercury fillings that are 20 plus years old. And so I started digging into the research about heavy metals and mercury from amalgams, which is a whole rabbit hole that you can go into. And if you wish to do so, I'll include a link to some of the medical literature on that. But anyway, so I started to wonder if a lot of the kind of DBH seeming symptoms were actually because of, a heavy metal thing happening. And there's a lot of medical literature to supporting evidence that your dopamine pathways can be affected, and the breakdown of dopamine can be hindered by heavy metal toxicity. So after the urgent care visit and learning that my kidney function was great, I had already had an appointment scheduled with another practitioner in neurology, and asked at that appointment if I could get heavy metal tested. I did, and unfortunately the heavy metal testing there was only for acute and like recent exposure, in my understanding. That they said that there was, like, it did cover some chronic, and if that's the case, I was just missing it. I tried reading the like clinical interpretive information, and to me it was coming across as like all recent, and it was just lab blood work. It wasn't like a hair analysis or a fingernail or toenail analysis or anything like that. It was just purely blood-based test. And so had that done, that all came back negative for heavy metals, which is also good, but also still kind of like, okay, well, what's going on? Made an appointment with a dentist that is a biological and naturopathic dentist who is able to safely remove amalgam fillings. And so just so that I could explore that and see if it's recommended, the thought being there was like, maybe I damaged the mercury fillings, or maybe I've just been, maybe the exposure, I drink a lot of hot fluids because I'm cold all the time, and also because I like decaf coffee and I like the taste, that it in and of itself, the heat from warm beverages can cause mercury fillings to release vapors, which are inhaled and they get into the bloodstream. So I don't know how accurate heavy metal testing would be in kind of capturing that, but to me, like, maybe it's too assumptive to say so, but I would think that could affect the body in some way. Something I wanted to add in here that I didn't talk about was a second trip to the ER that I had made. I was at the ER like 2 weekends in a row. It was not my favorite, but I had one of the symptoms that I have had, chronic symptoms that I've had, is that when my symptoms flare, I get this like sensitivity to touch, like numbness, kind of just like painful feeling on the right side of my body, and it'll kind of come and go. But that was something that cropped up for me recently amid all of the symptoms. And the reason that I am mentioning this is there's been suggestion, at least in this oxalate support group, that neurological symptoms can be associated with oxalate intake. And so for anybody who might be listening who has a lot of neurological symptoms, I wanted to make sure that I'm not only talking about kidney symptoms that I've experienced, but also the neurological part, to kind of give a more comprehensive picture of what's been happening. But there was a morning where I had just kind of like blurry vision, and then I had head pain, and it was kind of like the ice pick pain that I typically get, but it felt kind of different. And I also felt just kind of off, like a little confused, like irritable. I went to go take a shower, and then I felt completely like I was washing my foot, and I felt completely like disconnected from my foot, like I couldn't feel it. And that really freaked me out. We have a history of like stroke in my family, and so that was of course my biggest concern. And so I had my husband drive me to the ER, which, if you're thinking that you're having a stroke, don't do that. Just call 911. Time is brain is the saying. And I took a big risk there. Like, we were in the car, and I could feel like this like sense of heaviness like coming over the right side of my body, and it was very, very concerning. I had to definitely practice a lot of like anxiety reducing breathing there. not recommended, but needless to say, at the ER, they were great. They did the whole stroke protocol, ruled out stroke with MRI and CT. It was the first time I ever had like a full-on drug panel done ever, in all the times that I've been to the ER. So I'm super curious. I don't know, maybe because like I speculated, maybe because my eyelids have been so droopy and I had recent lab work where I had like, maybe they saw like where the IV or the, I'd been poked with needles prior. Maybe they were suspecting that I was like shooting myself up or something. I don't know. But anyways, so stroke was ruled out. And for those that might be like, are you pregnant? Like, no, like I had two pregnancy tests done, one at each ER visit, and then also like I got my period, so as described in this video. So I'm not pregnant. I do feel like I'm retaining a lot of water, so I do feel like heavier and weird. So I wouldn't blame you for questioning that, but just as a side note. But anyways, yeah, like wanted to kind of highlight that neurological symptom as well. I've heard of like one other person in my support groups who's had that kind of like one-sided sensation, like sensitivity and whatnot. So if you've experienced that as well, I'd be curious. I was in a hemiplegic migraine group for a while. I might still be in it. And so for a long time I was suspecting that maybe that was that kind of migraine. The head pain is so like short-lived for me, and I know that like folks talk about like silent migraine. I don't know that I necessarily subscribe to that. I think it's like maybe overly simplistic, at least for me. Like I feel like there's some kind of trigger happening beneath the surface, and so it would be very interesting to me if that trigger has been oxalates all along, because I realize I've been eating so many oxalates for so long in my diet that it would kind of make sense at this point, but I think the research isn't quite there yet. So yeah, I'd be super curious if anybody else has experienced similar. So anyway, so there's been a lot, right? And then I had my annual set up with my primary, and after telling her that I was still having, seemingly having kidney issues after the urgent care visit and after the lab work indicating that I didn't have any issues with my kidneys, at least in their function, she ordered an ultrasound, which I was very grateful for, because my head was kind of going in that direction of like, maybe it's something structural or something that we're just not capturing in the lab work. And the ultrasound did come back with a few concerns that my primary ordered a CT urogram. And in the meantime, I kept thinking about something that my naturopath had mentioned a couple of times, which was that I would need to be careful with oxalates in my diet. And I had heard her say this a couple of times, and I hadn't really thought much of it. I had briefly looked into oxalates in the past and was just like, yeah, I don't eat a lot of rhubarb. Some things maybe, but like to me, the amounts didn't, and this is partly just my ignorance, like I really didn't have an idea of like what a safe amount of oxalate intake is on a daily basis, and I just made a lot of assumptions that I wasn't intaking a lot of oxalates and that I was fine, but I was very wrong. And so in looking at all this, I started to realize I have been eating so many oxalates. Going gluten-free, I really started eating a lot of buckwheat flour. I actually really enjoy buckwheat flour, like multiple quarter cup servings a day. And because of the recent concern about DBH function, I had retried introducing a vitamin C supplement into my diet as well, which was a very low dose, only 180 milligrams. But when I dug into like the actual ingredients, I had decided to not go the ascorbic acid route for various reasons. And I had chose a supplement that was based on AMLA, AMA, AMLA and acerola. And come to find out that amla can be really high in oxalates. And so I was having, dark chocolate daily, buckwheat flour daily. I've had a lot of sweet potatoes in the past, just a lot of oxalates that I didn't recognize. And recently I'd been eating a lot of kiwi for the vitamin C. So yeah, I was very wrong about the oxalates, and now I am definitely paying for it. If that's my interpretation of what's happening currently. But anyways, amid all of this, our oven broke. And so I was literally not able to make the buckwheat pancakes that I usually make. And I was like, okay, well, this could be a blessing in disguise because I need to stop eating so many oxalates. But on the flip side of that, if you've done any research on oxalates, you might have heard about oxalate dumping. I think I might have so drastically decreased the amount of oxalates that I'm consuming that I'm in a lot of pain. I'm in a lot of pain. I'm having kidney pain. I'm having so much joint pain. Still having urinary symptoms. I did have a night the other night where, and this was before I reduced my oxalate intake, but I had just waves of groin pain, and I thought it had been, I literally started my period that day, and I thought my God, these are the worst menstrual cramps I've ever had. And I went to go massage my stomach, and that was a terrible idea because that just seemed to make it so much worse. But I was just every 5 to 10 minutes I was getting really intense pain. And so I think a kidney stone was passing. I'm hoping that maybe the CT urogram will provide some clarity about that. I haven't seen anything in my urine as far as crystals or anything, but it's just been a lot, y'all. It's been a lot. But yeah, so those are all the areas I've been exploring recently, which are DBH, heavy metals, oxalates. I feel like I'm forgetting one in there. But yeah, it's been quite a journey the past couple of months. I'm just trying to stay functional at this point for my job and social life, which is kind of non-existent right now. But I am hopeful. I joined a group, if you're super interested in the whole oxalate bit. There's this Facebook group called Trying Low Oxalates, TLO. They also have a YouTube channel called Wizards of Ox, OX, as in oxalates. Pretty clever, I thought. But they're very research oriented, and there seems to be a lot of support there, so that's something I'm trying out. But yeah, so those are my updates. I think what I'm learning here, I think largely is healing, even when you experience degrees of healing, an improvement in chronic illness, it's definitely not a straightforward path. And I think it's not necessarily because things aren't working, although that can be the case depending, but I think a lot of the times there's just other factors, for me, the oxalate piece that we're just not aware of, that can complicate things. And I think also it's been really important to remember that I'm working with this fantastic naturopath. She's brilliant, and I've gained a huge level of trust with her, my trust in her, and that's really fantastic, and I'm so grateful. But it also means that I still need to be looking out for things that she might not be aware of, that only I can know. She wouldn't know how much buckwheat flour I've been ingesting. She wouldn't know that I've been having a ton of kiwi, or there's still has to be a lot of communication happening and a lot of awareness amid all of that, And so I think that's really important. But yeah, if you're interested in looking into like mercury fillings and that kind of thing, or what was the other thing I was going to link for you guys? I don't remember, but if I remember, I'll put it below, guys. Just look for those links. Brain's a bit not totally up to speed right now. But yeah, so if you have any success stories, or if you just want to commiserate, I feel like it's just so confusing sometimes, because I feel like, especially with the oxalates, you know, a lot of the foods are like considered such healthy foods, like sweet potatoes and buckwheat flour, and there's just so many things. And I think that, like, it's just like, well, what can we eat at this point? Like, it's become a joke in our house, like, what can we eat? Because, you know, having already gotten low histamine and everything, it's just, whew. But anyways, if you have any encouragement to those of us who are going through it right now, that's much appreciated. Or if you have like a success story of like coming out of oxalate issues or heavy metal issues, I would really love to hear them. I could use the encouragement. But I hope everybody is doing well, and I hope to talk to you guys in a better physical state in the future. Take care. Love y'all.